Hi and welcome back. Today I'm going to be painting this beautiful semi-abstract scene of a distant headland with the town lights just twinkling in the distance at sunset. I'm using this reference photograph from Pixabay. The link to that will be in the description below. I'm using Millford 100% cotton cold pressed paper. It's 140 pounds weight and it's taped to my board with ordinary decorators masking tape. My board's at an angle of about 45 degrees, which helps the paint to flow. I'm going to sketch out a very loose approximation of the photograph. I'm using a carpenter's pencil. I find the large dark lead really useful for sketching loosely. It's a little bit like using a large paintbrush. It stops you from fiddling and just encourages you just to keep your line work really simple. So all I want is the horizon line, the distant headlands, the midground rocks and the foreground rocks, just lightly penciled in. There's a copy of the reference photograph and a copy of the sketch to download, trace or copy available in my Patreon group. So if you're interested in that, please follow the link below. So this is my sketch. Let's take another look at the photograph and remind ourselves of it. I think it's a really nice simple composition with beautiful light in the sky, which is then reflected in the sea, of course, and that contrasts really well with the dark silhouetted headlands and rocks. So I'll be looking to get something very similar to this with these lovely dark tonal values, but the beautiful light in the sky and the sea. I shall simplify the rocks and not put as many markings onto the wet sand, just to keep things really fresh and quite stylised. And of course I'll be including the lights of the town on the far distant headland, which I think is a really pretty but subtle focal point. I'm going to paint the sky and the sea all at the same time. I'm painting through the rocks because they're going to be darker, so I'm wetting the whole page. I'm using a large bamboo flat brush or haki brush. It's one that I bought online a couple of years ago, so I can't remember where I got it. But any large wash brush will do. I've now laid my board flat because I don't need gravity to help me to paint the sky in this instance. I'm going to put in some cerulean blue, a couple of bands of it horizontally across the sky, and then I shall introduce my alizarin crimson. I'm using a limited palette today, just the cerulean blue, alizarin crimson, indigo and a bit of Payne's grey, and at the end I shall use some white gouache to pick out the lights of the town on the distant headland. So this is the alizarin crimson going in between the cerulean blue, and you can see how wet the paper is. You can see the shine there. Everything will soften and diffuse, but it won't move too much as the board is flat. Now you can also see that I've painted through my rocks, and that's fine because the rocks are going to be dark, so it doesn't matter. We don't have to cut round them. There's no white of the paper to preserve in this instance. And I've just introduced a little bit of a mixture of indigo and Payne's grey just to darken up the far right horizon line. This is a flat brush, it's clean and it's damp, and I'm just using it first to maybe see if I can just pull out a few little highlights across the wet sand in the foreground, and then using it to drag a little bit of paint with the tips of the flat brush across horizontally across the wet sand and the water, and that starts to help me to build up sort of blended soft look with some suggestions of maybe a few sort of ripples and things like that on the water. And I can do the same in the sky while it's wet. I have to be quick because it's beginning to dry out. So the tips of the flat brush, again, moving the existing colours around and putting in the paint in little tiny marks horizontally. And that's just giving me some really soft suggestions of wispy cloud. So that's the sky and the sea done. I just need to leave it flat and let it dry. Now here's the dry wash. I've pulled my board back up to 45 degrees and I'm now going to paint in this largest headland. The far distant headland I shall do a bit later on, once these large silhouetted rocks have dried back and I can see how dark or how much lighter I need that distant headland to be, because things get a little bit lighter as they get further back into the distance. But I need that distant headland to be fairly dark so that the lights show up on it. But I'll be able to judge the tones a lot better once the rest of the rocks are in. So I'm using my 3/4 inch flat brush, and this is a mixture of all my colours, mostly indigo and Payne's grey, but there's a little touch of the blue and the alizarin crimson into it, and that keeps this dark colour in harmony with the rest of the painting. So I'm cutting around my mid-ground rock because I want that to be a slightly different tone. I want it to be sort of slightly richer and darker. So I'm going to put in thicker paint and probably use the corner of a store card to scrape off some lighter highlights onto the closer rocks. So here comes the mid-ground rock. You can see I've got a slightly richer, darker mixture. And to start with, I'm going to leave a tiny bit of a gap so that the first headland doesn't bleed into this closer one. So I can keep a degree of separation. If I need to fill that in, I can do that a little bit later, but I'd rather preserve that fresh edge there and fill it in later than lose it and then regret covering it in, because I can't get back that white. You can see I'm working very closely to my pencil sketch, using the tips of the brush to keep the base oriented completely horizontally so that it looks like the rocks are disappearing into the sea and into the sand. So trying to keep all these rocks flat based where they meet the sand or the sea. And now sweeping the brush across with very rich paint for the foreground rocks. I'm taking the paint well over the tape, and that means when the tape's removed, it implies that there is rock beyond the painting, if you see what I mean. And I'm leaving gaps, little bits of the underwash showing through those rocks, so that just gives the foreground rocks a little bit of added sparkle. I'm only going to put a few rocks in the foreground, and I'm only going to put a small amount of suggested shadow / reflections. I want this to be really misty and dreamy. As I say, it's a semi-abstract piece, and you can see I can just use the tips of the flat brush to just pull out little bits of paint where there's just implying that tiny bit of ripple and reflection. As it is here, I don't really want to show where the wet sand ends and the water starts. I want it just all to be this sort of lovely, sort of misty transition from one to the other. So here's the corner of my card. You noticed I put a little bit of extra paint over that mid headland there, and that means that I can etch through more easily. It's just an ordinary plastic store card, and the rounded corner is perfect to sort of pull through the damp paint, and it moves the paint out of the way and you can see the paper underneath showing through. And so this is a good way of lifting out highlights in this case. And I'm going to lift some through this distant headland as well. They might look a bit harsh, but it's all still damp and those marks will close up and become much fainter. As I say, it does all look fairly harsh at the moment, but these do soften back and can be very effective at just sort of suggesting a little bit more shape and form. What it does is it draws more attention to the very dark areas as well. Once you've got that lighter area, you get the counter change between light and dark. So that's that stage finished. It all needs to dry completely, and then I'm going to put in the distant headland and a little bit more detail into the foreground sand and sea. Now here it is, it's nice and dry, so I've added a bit more water to the same mixture of the four colours that I used for the rocks, so that it's very slightly paler. And I'm being careful to try and keep it nice and straight and flat across the horizon. I want a little bit more shape to it than that because I need to have enough room for my focal point, which is going to be my my little gleaming distant town, the lights just twinkling in the distance. And then a slightly weaker, more transparent wash for an even, more distant headland, so that it becomes paler and sort of disappears off into the distance. And then continuing with that same paler grey colour, a mixture of indigo, Payne's grey, cerulean blue and alizarin crimson, all four of the colours but quite watery, and I'm sweeping it across the wet sand just to give some indications of sort of just ripples, textures of the sand, and again the same, drawing it across underneath the rocks and into the water just in a few places, picking up a little bit more pink in places, a little bit more blue in others, and a little bit more grey in others too. And this is just to flatten out the land a little bit and just to kind of join all those rocks down across in a sort of curve, like a C shape, if you see what I mean. So it's a sort of a C-shaped composition. The top of the C is the headland. It sweeps around the rocks. And now I'm linking that across with these little sweeps of colour across the bottom, where the rocks are, but also just a little bit of linkage of shape and tone across where I've got my slightly darker little bit of water on the right. So just a bit of tone just brought in again, very much keeping things horizontal so that we keep the water nice and flat and still and calm. So I think that's everything is just about finished except for the lights on the headland, and I might put in a couple of birds. So first of all, I'm going to remove the tape and have a look at it, because once you remove the tape, it reveals a clean white border, and that kind of allows you to look at it with fresh eyes. You can see it as a whole painting rather than just something on a bit of a messy board. And here it is against a cleaner board, and I quite like the look of it, but listening to the sound of the gulls, I'm not sure whether you heard them, but my studio is quite close to the sea and I just heard them shrieking overhead. I think I'm going to put in a few small gulls, just I think 3 small gulls with my small calligraphy brush right over the headland where I'm going to put in the distant lights. I think they'll help to add a little bit of movement to this very still painting, but also draw the viewer's eye to where I'm going to add my lights. I've dipped my small calligraphy brush straight into my tube of white gouache. Gouache is opaque, so hopefully it'll give me the effect that I'm looking for. So first of all, just spotting a few lights along that headland. Just a few little dots and dabs. Sometimes it'll dry back a bit paler, but you can go over with a second coat. But also what I'm going to do too is to go around with some darker paint. So you can see I'm going around with my dark mixture around the lighter mixtures, and again the counter change is making those whiter lights look a little bit brighter. Then I can go back in if I need to with a little bit more paint. You see how much brighter the gouache looks with a second coat, but also now that I've darkened up very subtle areas around the lights. So here's the finished painting, and I hope you enjoyed that. I really enjoyed painting it. I'm not sure that I got it dark enough. I think probably could do with adding a bit more indigo to the blue there for the sky and the reflections. But part of playing around and enjoying experimenting with paint is kind of learning what you need to create certain effects, and it's not something that we all know automatically. We kind of have to try these things out, and I've had a lot of fun painting this. So many thanks for watching. Please leave us a like and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, and thank you so much to everyone who supports us on Patreon. If you'd like to support the channel on Patreon, then please follow either of the links below. Many thanks, take care and happy painting. Bye.